joining us now is Jim Dean. Jim, as many of you or most of you know, is the chair of Democracy for America, DFA, good progressive organization involved in making democratic politics more democratic, is the way I would put it. And Jim, as always, man, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
We were just talking, by the way, Jim and I, before the show, about, radio now always has a video component. My first introduction to that was I used to go on the Young Turks a lot.
Yeah.
And I never used to comb my hair. I used to co-host, and it was on Air America, and that was it. And finally I went on, I was in a T-shirt, my hair was messy, and they said, oh, our viewers are watching. And I said, really, how many? They said, about 300,000.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, guys.
Yeah. Glad I don't have any hair.
Me too, now. But, so listen, you guys were really involved. You had, if I recall correctly, earlier this year, you had, or last year actually now, you had your members vote.
Yep.
They endorsed Bernie Sanders, right?
Yep.
And you guys did a lot of great work for Bernie. As you may know, I worked for Bernie myself for a year as his writer. And now he's endorsed Hillary. We're on to the general. What's your focus between now and November?
Well, there's a few things. One, we want to be as supportive and collaborative as we possibly can with whatever the Sanders entity and movement is doing. That's really important. It's important that they realize their goals of supporting a lot of down-ballot candidates, which we're also doing, as we always have, and certainly want to work with them on, and training and some other components of this. I want this thing to relaunch now that his campaign is going to wind down, and I want it very much to be the conscience, the voice, and frankly the energy in the party. It already is all of that,
right.
But we need to take this over, and they're a terrific movement for that. The other thing is there are a number of really interesting entrepreneurial networks that have come out of this. Some of them are groups, some of them are, I'll call them networks for want of a better word. And we want to be as supportive as we can of that effort too. And certainly we do what we do. We still have the trainings going on. We just did a great candidate training in Arkansas for some down ballot candidates. And we expect to do all of those things. But there are other folks that are in this that are approaching this from a different angle, that are giving other folks a way to get involved, if not in the political process, at least with changing this country, which is what we all want to do. And that's something we've got to figure out a way to do, to support.
You put your finger on something that I've been really thinking about a lot lately, Jim Dean, which is the Bernie Sanders campaign catalyzed a lot of energy. And a presidential campaign is perfectly situated to do that, perfectly positioned to do that, because you have a charismatic figure to kind of put that excitement around. Now I'm with you that and I think Bernie is too, by the way, that the energy is in the down ballot candidates, in creating a movement, not just around an individual's candidacy for presidency, really transforming this country. And one of the things, because I'm kind of a message guy, one of the things that's on my mind a lot is how do we keep that same energy and excitement going when it's not about one individual or one personality, it's about a movement. How do we keep people as motivated and as excited as they were?
Well, I think there are challenges. Number one, having been in this situation before, a lot of folks are reflecting, and Tuesday was not an easy day for a lot of us.
Right.
And I think when you're reflecting we can reflect on a lot of great work that's been done by some incredible volunteers and people who not only went out and supported this campaign and got it to do as well as it did, but also changed things the way they were going. I mean, a good example of this would be Kim Foxx's election as the Cook County prosecutor in Illinois in the Illinois primary. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's already been done that has come out of this movement, and that needs to be, people need to think about that internally. The second thing is, there's a whole ton of folks who might not have been in this campaign but are disaffected voters who identified with it. May not have even voted in the primary, RJ, but have identified it, and those are the folks that I am really interested as well. I mean, some of them are in their 30s, some of them are in their 40s, some of them are in their 20s, some of them might have even worked on Obama's campaign, but they've all been very turned off the process. How do we motivate those folks also to get in. And part of that is these down ballot races because they affect our quality of lives more than anything else. But part of it is trying to steer people into networks that they're comfortable with, and that have the sense that we can get things done in them, because the party is not always the answer to that.
You're so right.
Those networks are coming up now, and I don't know who all of them are or anything. I mean, the Black Lives Matter movement is, of course, a great example of being something that gives people and is earning people's interest and interest in doing something about racial justice. There are others like this that are on this same pathway, and that's why we need to promote these folks, and that's why we need to make it easier for people to be empowered.
Yeah, you put your finger on exactly, I think, what I'm struggling with. And again, we're talking with Jim Dean, who's the executive director or the chair of Democracy for America. And to me, it's Black Lives Matter is a perfect example of a movement that gives people's lives meaning and energy and motivation, and that can be translated into street activism. It can be translated into electoral candidacies. Occupy was a similar kind of thing.
And they've also had success. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt, but that's the big thing. I mean, success is a big part of this, and they're having that, and they have had it.
Yeah, no, success breeds success, right?
Yes.
Victory breeds victory. And this goes back to the issue of energy. So, I mean, does this movement that was energized, and they're kind of like Venn diagrams, they're overlapping, but this Sanders movement, the Occupy movement, Black Lives movement, does this thing need a name?
I actually tend to shy away from that because what it needs to be, in my view, is a movement that is frankly operates outside of centers of power and derives its own power outside of centers of power. And I this is a little bit out there, but what I worry about it is if it gets a name, if it gets a legal structure,
right?
All of a sudden it makes it easier to be marginalized in circles of incumbency, and whether it's Albany, New York, or Washington D.C. or someplace else, and it's not that. It's very organic that way, very vibrant, and we've got to keep it that way. So I'm okay if there isn't a name. I'm okay if there isn't necessarily a figurehead on it. Obviously, Bernie is very inspirational. People like Elizabeth Warren are, and we want to keep them out and keep them in as part of this, but. It's going to be a little while before there's a lot of definition around it, and I'm very comfortable with that.
It's really interesting because the flip. I think that's exactly right. I also think if it's too hierarchical in terms of, obviously I love Bernie. I worked for him for a year, but if it's any one person, it lacks the kind of flexibility that it needs in order to adapt to changing circumstances. And I think that's part of what you're talking about. On the other hand, I do worry, and we're just kind of brainstorming here, but I do worry, Jim Dean, that without some kind of symbol or energizing, I don't know how to put it, something to coalesce around, that it might start to get too diffuse and people are all doing their own thing and they become demotivated and unfocused, and I don't want it to fade away or diffuse. Yeah,
and it's look, if I had the secret sauce on that one, who knows what would be going on? But I mean, that is a very tough fine line. I mean, you're absolutely correct, and thank you for bringing that up. I mean, it's really hard to figure that out, and there's going to be a lot of folks in there that are going to claim certain mantles that shouldn't, and there are going to be a lot of folks in there that don't claim the mantles that should actually be a central focal point because they're good and they're terrific, and there's some people here that frankly should have a lot higher profiles than they do right now. It's going to be a long way, but I will say one thing. If I think about the entrepreneurial elements that came out of Howard's campaign and sort of the years of 2005 to 2008, those were fairly energetic times, and we learned to work with a lot of other groups. And a lot of this was a lot logistical, weedy stuff. But once we got there, we found it pretty easy, and we do find it very easy, and frankly, very rewarding. To work as coalitions. We actually have a training manual thing on how to be in a coalition and manage your own expectations and everything. So I think we can get to that because simply people are a little bit more sophisticated now than they were 10 years ago. And I'm optimistic that we can do that. We're not going to be agreeing on everything, but that's not the point. The point is where can we have success in issues that really matter? And if we're seeing that out of something that is less structured, like Occupy, which went on to do a whole bunch of stuff in the mortgage, criminal mortgage activity environment, saving people's houses. Black Lives Matter movement, which has really brought to the racial justice issue to the fore and a lot of campaigns and gotten things done with towns that have bad police departments. I think if we're getting that going right now, then there's sky's the limit.
Now, a couple other things I wanted to talk to you about before I let you go, Jim Dean. One is one of the things we learned a lot from your brother, Howard Dean's campaign. We learned a lot from Bernie's campaign. One of the things we learned from Bernie's campaign is that the left, at least as far as the Democratic Party is concerned, is the future. That whatever you want to call it, the progressive movement is the future. Yeah. That people, voters from the age of 18 to 40 or 34, depending on the polls you look at, and
45.
45.
Yep.
These are really, the wave of the future is a wave of change, progressive change. I mean, we learned that. What does DFA do, and what does the movement in the Democracy for America, your organization, and what does the movement do in general to build on that knowledge and that momentum going forward?
Well, I think, for one thing, in terms of relieving the incredible disconnect between political process right now and political leadership and the rank-and-file Americans. Again, this is a large group of people. I think of it as actually under the age of 45, because that's been an age cutoff in a lot of different communities and a lot of different elections recently. And so in order to relieve the disconnect between large groups of Americans and the political leadership, we need to help support actually a lot of these good candidates that are running. I mentioned Kim Foxx. I mean, Bernie, a ton of people signing up.
And Kim Foxx, I hate to interrupt you, but
sure.
Just for a second, Kim Foxx in Chicago, a district attorney candidate, she represents the intersection of multiple forces, the Bernie movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, the fact that the DA in Chicago did not indict in the Laquan McDonald case. So that she was a great example of the intersection.
And political reform.
And political reform,
the DA, the previous person in there, was part of that machine, which is now being dismantled bit by bit. So a ton of people that signed up on Bernie's campaign to run for office. Can we support a lot of those folks? Can we support our down ballot candidates? A lot of them we consider to be justice candidates of one kind or another. And I think we can. I mean, we just had a person at our candidate night who is just fantastic, Attica Scott. She's going to be the first African-American legislator in Kentucky, African-American woman legislator in Kentucky in 20 years.
That's fantastic.
And she is not a shrinking violet. And you're going to see some...
ATTICA?
ATTICA, yes.
Like Attica State.
Attica, and her last name is Scott, S-C-O-T-T, and she comes from the Lexington area. And there are folks like this. I mean, Helen Kim in Philadelphia, school board. I mean, there's a lot of folks that are out there that are, reflect the age demographic and are look like the rest of this country. So can we support them in the political process, and can we get enough of them in there at once? And this is the biggest challenge of all, so that they do not suffer from some of the institutional pressures that other candidates like this have before, particularly in 2006, when people like Rahm Emanuel were running the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. All of a sudden they were in Washington. All of a sudden it was about raising money. And a lot of these folks stuck as true as they could, but the pressure on them is incredible, and we need to change that culture. And that means you need to get a lot of these new folks to run and help them get into office.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, that's God's work. And Jim Dean, chair of Democracy for America, last question for you. Are you having fun yet?
Yeah, I've had a lot of fun. In fact, I'm a little bit coming down. I'm not doing well emotionally with Bernie's campaign winding down. Frankly, it's been a really incredible 6 months for me from a personal standpoint. A lot of us were alive, and we really believed that this could work, and in many respects we had great success, but we wanted it all. So
all right,
we're going to decompress off of that a bit.
All right, I understand. All right, Jim Dean, thanks so much for coming on the program.
Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.